When my daughter told me I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving dinner because her new husband's family found my working class background embarrassing, I smiled, walked to my car, and made 3 phone calls. By Christmas, I had dismantled their perfect little world piece by piece. And that was just the beginning of what they deserved. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments what you think about family loyalty versus social status. Mom, we need to talk. Melody's voice carried that particular tone she'd developed since marrying Preston. The one that meant she was about to deliver news she knew would hurt me. I set down my coffee cup on her granite kitchen island, the one I'd helped finance when she complained that laminate wasn't suitable for entertaining. The November afternoon sun streamed through windows I'd paid to have professionally cleaned every month for the past 2 years. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" She couldn't meet my eyes, her gaze fixed on the marble countertop that had maxed out my credit card last spring. "It's about Thanksgiving dinner next week." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "What about it?" "Preston's parents are hosting this year, and..." She twisted her wedding ring, the diamond catching the light. "They specifically requested that it be just their circle, people they're comfortable with." "Their circle." I repeated the words slowly, tasting the bitter implications. "And I'm not in their circle." "It's not personal, Mom. It's just that the Whitfields are very traditional. Old money, you know? They're not used to it." She gestured vaguely, as if my entire existence could be dismissed with a wave of her manicured hand. "Not used to what exactly?" Melody's face flushed. "People from different backgrounds. Preston's mother went to Vassar. His father owns half the commercial real estate in the city. Their friends are doctors, lawyers, business owners. You work at..." "I manage a medical billing office," I interrupted. "The same job that paid for your college education while you lived rent-free in my house until you were 26. That's different. This is about social compatibility. The Whitfields' friends discuss art, literature, wine. They summer in the Hamptons. What would you talk about with them?" The words hit like physical blows. 8 years of raising her alone after her father died. 8 years of 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat. To give her every opportunity I never had. 8 years of sacrifice so she could attend private school, go to Europe with her college friends, never worry about money the way I had worried every single day of my adult life. "I see." I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. "And where exactly am I supposed to spend Thanksgiving? Maybe you could go to Aunt Claire's? Or I thought we could do something the weekend after. Just us." The weekend after. Like Thanksgiving was a business meeting that could be rescheduled for mutual convenience. I looked around the kitchen I'd helped create. The chef's stove I'd co-signed for when Preston was between jobs. The dining set I'd bought when Melody decided their old furniture wasn't impressive enough for entertaining. Every inch of this house bore traces of my financial support and emotional investment. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be." I walked past her toward the front door, past the family photos where I noticed my presence had gradually diminished over the past year. My daughter's voice followed me, trying to smooth over the rejection with promises and explanations that only made it worse. "We can start a new tradition next year. Maybe something smaller, more intimate." I paused at the door, my hand on the brass knob I polished countless times during my visits. "Melody," I said without turning around, "tell the Whitfields I said thank you." "Thank you for what?" "For showing me exactly who you've become." The October air was crisp against my face as I walked to my car. Behind me, I heard Melody call my name once, but I didn't turn around. The door closed with a soft click that sounded final in the afternoon silence. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold beside me and my laptop open to Facebook. The house felt different somehow. quieter, but not in a peaceful way. More like the silence that follows an explosion when you're still trying to figure out what just happened. I started with Preston's profile, studying the man my daughter had chosen to marry. Harvard Business School graduate, currently seeking new opportunities, which I'd learned was wealthy person speak for unemployed. His timeline showed an endless stream of expensive restaurants, golf courses, and social events that cost more than I made in a month. The Whitfield family came next. Margaret Whitfield's Instagram was a masterclass in old money ostentation. Photos of their estate in Martha's Vineyard, charity galas where she wore gowns that cost more than my car, wine tastings in Napa Valley where she posed with bottles worth hundreds of dollars each. The comments were full of praise from friends with names like Muffy and Bunny, all admiring her exquisite taste and refined lifestyle. Charas Whitfield's LinkedIn painted the picture of a commercial real estate mogul with connections throughout the city's business community. Board positions at the country club, the symphony, the art museum. A man accustomed to power and influence. Someone who probably couldn't fathom why his son had married beneath their social station. But it was Melody's recent posts that made my chest tighten with a mixture of hurt and anger. Photos from last weekend's dinner party, where she played hostess in clothes I'd bought her, serving appetizers on dishes I'd helped her choose. Comments from her new friends praising her natural elegance and sophisticated palate. No mention of where she'd learned to cook or who had worked extra shifts to pay for her culinary classes. 3 years. That's how long I'd been supporting their lifestyle while they gradually edited me out of their social media presence. 3 years of mortgage assistance when Preston was between opportunities. 3 years of covering their utilities, their car payments, their credit card bills, all while Melody learned to be the kind of woman who could hold her own with the Whitfields. I opened my banking app and started calculating. The numbers made my stomach churn. $68,000 over 3 years, more than my annual salary after taxes. Money that should have gone toward my retirement, toward fixing the roof that leaked every winter, toward the vacation I'd been promising myself for a decade. My phone buzzed with a text from Melody. Mom, I hope you understand this isn't about you personally. The Whitfields just have certain expectations. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and began researching the Whitfield family business. If they wanted to play social games based on status and money, it was time they learned who they were really dealing with. Monday morning brought the first phase of my response. I dressed carefully in my best navy suit, the one I bought for Melody's college graduation, and drove to First National Bank where I'd maintained my accounts for 15 years. Mrs. Richardson, what can I do for you today? Marcus Webb, my loan officer, greeted me with the professional warmth reserved for long-term customers with good credit histories. I need to discuss some changes to my automatic transfers, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. He pulled up my account information, and I watched his eyebrows rise slightly as he reviewed the numbers. 3 years of monthly transfers to Preston and Melody's joint account, amounts ranging from $1,200 to $2,800, depending on their various emergencies and lifestyle adjustments. These are substantial transfers, Mrs. Richardson. You're looking to modify the amounts? I'm looking to cancel them, all of them, effective immediately. Marcus typed something into his computer, then looked at me with the expression of someone who'd seen family financial dramas play out countless times. May I ask if this is a temporary suspension or a permanent cancellation? Permanent, and I'd like to redirect those funds into my retirement account instead. That's quite a change in your financial strategy. Over the past 3 years, you've transferred approximately $70,000. Redirecting that amount into retirement savings will significantly improve your long-term financial security. $70,000. Hearing it spoken aloud, made the betrayal feel sharper somehow. $70,000 while my daughter's new family considered me an embarrassment, unworthy of sharing their Thanksgiving table. How long will it take to process the cancellation? The transfers will be stopped immediately. Is there anything else I can help you with today? I smiled for the first time in days. Actually, yes. I'd like to set up a new savings account. Call it the Self-Respect Fund. That afternoon, I made my second call. Dr. Patricia Chen, my dentist, was also Preston's former employer at the financial consulting firm where he'd worked before his sudden departure 6 months ago. Eleanor, how nice to hear from you. How's Melody adjusting to married life? She's learning a lot about priorities, I said carefully. Actually, I was calling because I'm curious about something. Preston mentioned he left his position at your firm to pursue other opportunities. I hope his departure wasn't too disruptive. There was a long pause. Dr. Chen and I had known each other for years, long enough for her to hear the questions I wasn't directly asking. Eleanor, are you asking as Preston's mother-in-law or as someone who might have concerns about his reliability? What would you tell me if I were asking as someone with concerns? Another pause. I'd tell you be very careful about any financial entanglements with that young man. His departure from our firm wasn't entirely voluntary, and the circumstances involved some irregularities with client funds. Nothing criminal, you understand, but serious enough that we couldn't continue the relationship. My hand tightened around the phone. What kind of irregularities? The kind that suggest he views other people's money as his own. The kind that indicate a fundamental lack of understanding about appropriate boundaries in financial relationships. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my laptop screen where Preston's LinkedIn still claimed he was seeking new opportunities. The reality was that he was unemployed and unemployable in his field, living off the financial support I'd been providing while his wife gradually distanced herself from the woman who made it all possible. My phone rang. Melody's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message about how much she missed me and hoped I wasn't taking things too personally. The message ended with a casual mention that their car payment was due and their joint account seemed to be running low. I deleted the voicemail and opened my contacts list. Time for the third call. James Morrison had been investigating financial fraud for 25 years before starting his private investigation firm. We'd met through mutual friends and had always been impressed by his methodical approach to uncovering the truth. If Preston had problems beyond what Dr. Chen had hinted at, James would find them. Eleanor, this is an interesting request, he said after I'd explained what I needed. You want me to investigate your own son-in-law? I want you to investigate Preston Whitfield. The fact that he's married to my daughter is secondary to the fact that I've been financially supporting someone I apparently don't know at all. What exactly are you hoping to find? The truth about his employment history, his financial situation, why he really left Dr. Chen's firm. I want to know who my daughter married and what kind of family she's trying to impress me out of joining. James quoted his rates, and I agreed without hesitation. $70,000 in transfers over 3 years meant I could afford to spend a few thousand learning the truth about where that money had really gone. The report arrived 5 days later, 43 pages of documented evidence that painted a picture far worse than I'd imagined. Preston hadn't just been fired from one job, he'd been quietly let go from 3 different positions over the past 4 years, each time for increasingly serious financial irregularities. The pattern was always the same. Charm his way into positions of trust, gradually overstep boundaries with client funds, leave before formal charges could be filed, but with enough suspicion to make him unemployable in legitimate financial services. More damaging were the credit reports and financial records James had legally obtained. Preston was drowning in debt, credit cards maxed out, student loans in default, a car loan on the BMW he drove that was 3 months behind. The only thing keeping him and Melody afloat was my monthly transfers, which they'd been using not just for living expenses, but to make minimum payments on debts they'd hidden from everyone, including each other. The most shocking revelation came in the form of a recorded phone conversation James had legally obtained through his contacts in the industry. Preston talking to a former colleague about his marriage strategy. "She's perfect." His voice crackled through the recording. "Eleanor will do anything for Melody, and Melody will do anything to fit in with my family. I just have to keep them both convinced that they need me more than I need them." What about when the mother-in-law gets wise to the financial situation? That's the beauty of it. She's so desperate to be accepted by Melody's new social circle that she'll keep paying just to maintain the relationship. These working-class types are always so insecure about social status. They'll bankrupt themselves trying to buy their way into respectability. I sat in my kitchen, listening to the recording 3 times before I could fully process what I was hearing. My daughter's husband didn't just view me as an embarrassment. He viewed me as a mark, someone to be manipulated and exploited, while being systematically excluded from the life my money was funding. The investigative report included one final detail that made everything crystal clear. The Whitfield family's financial situation was far from the old money stability they projected. Charles Whitfield's commercial real estate empire was heavily leveraged and struggling in the current market. Margaret's expensive lifestyle was funded largely by credit and family trust funds that were rapidly depleting. Preston hadn't married into money. He'd married into debt disguised as status, and they were all living beyond their means while looking down on the woman whose financial support made their charade possible. I closed the report and reached for my phone. It was time to let them know that their private ATM had just figured out how the game was really played. The call came on Wednesday evening, exactly as I'd expected. Melody's voice carried a note of panic, barely concealed beneath false cheerfulness. "Mom, I'm so glad you answered. Listen, I know things got a little tense the other day, but I've been thinking. Maybe we were too hasty about Thanksgiving. Preston thinks it might be nice if you joined us after all." I stirred the pot of soup I was making for one, taking my time before responding. "That's quite a change of heart. What brought this on? We missed you. Family is family, right? And I realized that excluding you was wrong. The Whitfields are very understanding people. They'd love to meet you properly." The lie came so naturally that I almost admired her skill. Through James's contacts, I knew exactly what had brought on this sudden change of heart. The mortgage payment that had bounced 3 days ago when my automatic transfers stopped hitting their account. "That's very generous of them," I said. "What time would you like me there? Could you come around 2? That would give us time to prepare everyone for how wonderful you are." To coach me on appropriate behavior, she meant. To make sure I understood my role as the grateful charity case finally being allowed at the grown-ups table. "Of course, sweetheart. Should I bring anything?" "Oh no, don't worry about that. Margaret has everything perfectly planned. I'll see you tomorrow then." After I hung up, I walked to my desk, where James's investigative report lay next to a manila folder I'd been carefully preparing. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving dinner was going to be educational for everyone involved, but probably not in the way they were expecting. I spent the evening addressing envelopes and printing documents. 43 pages of financial records, credit reports, employment history, and recorded conversations. 3 years of bank statements showing every transfer, every emergency payment. Every time I'd covered their bills while they built their social media fantasy of affluent newlyweds. By Thursday morning, I had 12 identical packages ready for distribution, one for each member of the Whitfield family's inner circle, who would be gathering around their Thanksgiving table, bearing witness to what they assumed was an act of charity toward Preston's working-class mother-in-law. I dressed carefully in my best dress, the burgundy one I bought for Melody's reversal dinner, and drove across town to the Whitfield estate. The house sprawled across 3 manicured acres, every detail designed to project old money elegance. Cars lined the circular driveway, Mercedes, BMWs, a Jaguar that probably cost more than my annual salary. The front door opened before I could knock. Margaret Whitfield stood there in pearls and a silk blouse, her smile as perfectly crafted as her landscaping. "Eleanor, how lovely to finally meet you properly. Melody has told us so much about you." "I'll bet she has," I thought, but smiled warmly as I stepped inside. The foyer was designed to intimidate. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors who'd probably made their money in ways that wouldn't bear scrutiny. "What a beautiful home," I said, genuinely impressed despite everything. "You have exquisite taste." "Thank you. Charles and I believe in surrounding ourselves with quality. It sets the proper tone for entertaining." She led me through rooms that looked like museum displays, each piece of furniture and artwork carefully chosen to communicate wealth and refinement. In the living room, I counted 12 people already gathered, champagne glasses in hand. Conversation flowing with the easy confidence of people who'd never worried about money. "Everyone," Margaret announced, "this is Eleanor Richardson, Melody's mother." The conversations paused as heads turned toward me. I could feel their assessment. The slightly outdated dress, the department store jewelry, the woman who clearly didn't belong in their world, but was being tolerated for reasons they didn't quite understand. Preston appeared at my side, his smile as false as his employment history. "Eleanor, so glad you could make it. Can I get you some champagne?" "That would be lovely," I said, noting how he avoided making eye contact. Guilt? Or just his usual discomfort with the people whose money he was stealing? Melody emerged from the kitchen, stunning in a designer dress I'd never seen before, but had probably paid for indirectly. She hugged me with the kind of careful affection reserved for distant relatives you feel obligated to acknowledge. "Mom, you look wonderful. Come meet everyone." The introductions were a blur of names and achievements. Dr. Harrison, who'd recently returned from lecturing at Oxford, Jennifer Chen, whose art collection had been featured in Architectural Digest, William Porter, whose family foundation funded half the cultural institutions in the city. Each introduction came with a subtle emphasis on credentials and accomplishments, a gentle reminder that I was swimming in waters far deeper than anything I'd ever navigated. They were polite, properly educated people who knew how to make someone feel welcome while simultaneously making it clear they didn't belong. "And what do you do, Eleanor?" asked Jennifer, her tone carefully neutral. "I manage medical billing for a healthcare practice," I replied, watching the subtle shift in expressions around the circle. "How interesting," murmured Dr. Harrison. "The healthcare industry is so complex these days." It was expertly done. No one said anything directly condescending, but the message was clear. They viewed me as someone who dealt with paperwork, while they dealt with ideas, culture, and influence. Margaret announced that dinner was ready, and we moved into a dining room that belonged in a magazine. The table stretched 12 feet, set with china and crystal that caught the light from another chandelier. Fresh flowers, multiple courses waiting under silver domes, wine that Charles explained had been aging in his cellar for 15 years. I was seated between Melody and a woman named Patricia, whose husband owned several car dealerships. The placement was strategic, close enough to family to show acceptance, far enough from Charles and the other men to indicate my relative unimportance in the social hierarchy. The conversation flowed around topics I was clearly expected not to understand: recent exhibitions at the Met, political developments in Europe, wine regions in France they'd visited during the pandemic. when someone occasionally directed a question my way, it was with the careful condescension reserved for children or foreigners. "Eleanor, I imagine your work keeps you quite busy," said Patricia. "It does. Healthcare never stops, and people always need advocates to help them navigate insurance complexities." "How admirable that you found meaningful work," she replied, in the tone people use when discussing particularly dedicated servants. As the meal progressed, I watched the dynamics at play. Charles holding court at the head of the table, his wife orchestrating the service with military precision. Their friends performing their roles in a social theater they'd been rehearsing for decades. Preston and Melody trying desperately to fit in, contributing just enough to the conversations to prove they belonged while carefully avoiding any topics that might reveal their actual circumstances. It was beautifully choreographed and completely hollow. These people weren't friends. They were accessories to each other's status, gathering to confirm their shared superiority over people like me who actually worked for a living. "Eleanor," Charles said during the main course, "Melody tells us you've been wonderfully supportive during their early marriage. So many young couples struggle financially these days." The table went quiet, 12 pairs of eyes turning toward me with expressions of polite interest masking genuine curiosity. This was the moment they'd been building toward, the opportunity to acknowledge my financial contributions while making it clear they viewed such support as both expected and slightly pathetic. "Family helps family," I said simply. "That's what we do." "Indeed," agreed Margaret, "though I imagine it must be challenging on a fixed income. Your generosity is really quite touching." Touching. Like I was some elderly widow giving my last dollars to children who humored my need to feel useful. Around the table, I saw the barely concealed smirks, the shared understanding that they were witnessing an act of charity theater designed to make everyone feel good about including the help. That's when I reached for my purse and pulled out the first manila envelope. "Charles, since you mentioned financial challenges, I thought you might be interested in some documentation about exactly how supportive I've been." His smile faltered as I handed him the envelope. "What's this?" 3 years of bank records showing my transfers to Preston and Melody's account. $70,000 in total, not counting the furniture, car payments, and various emergencies I've covered. The silence was immediate and total. Charles opened the envelope, his face growing pale as he scanned the bank statements. Margaret looked over his shoulder, her expression shifting from polite interest to shock to something approaching horror. "Eleanor," Melody whispered, "what are you doing?" "I'm providing context," I said calmly, pulling out 11 more envelopes. "Since everyone was so interested in my financial situation, I thought you'd appreciate full transparency." I began distributing the envelopes around the table like party favors. Dr. Harrison received his with the expression of a man opening a letter bomb. Jennifer Chen held hers at arm's length, as if it might contaminate her designer outfit. Inside each envelope, you'll find documentation of Preston's employment history, including the reasons he left his last 3 positions, his current financial situation, including debts that far exceed anything he's disclosed to his wife, and a recording of him discussing his marriage strategy, which I think you'll find illuminating. Preston had gone completely white. "Eleanor, you can't be serious. This is completely inappropriate." "What's inappropriate?" I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence, "is taking $70,000 from someone while systematically excluding them from family gatherings because they're not good enough for your social circle." Margaret found her voice first, though it came out strangled. "Surely there's been some misunderstanding." "So, no misunderstanding. Your son married my daughter as part of a financial strategy to extract money from her working class mother while gaining access to your social circle. I've been funding this elaborate performance for 3 years while being gradually written out of their lives because my background embarrasses you. I stood up slowly, noting how 12 people who'd spent the evening demonstrating their superiority suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. The really fascinating part is in the financial records at the bottom of each packet. It turns out that Charles's real estate empire is leveraged to the point of collapse. Margaret's lifestyle is funded entirely by depleting trust funds, and this entire display of old money elegance is being performed by people who are essentially broke. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. 12 people staring at documents that revealed not just Preston's fraud, but the financial house of cards that supported their entire social structure. You've been looking down on me for working an honest job while living off family money that's rapidly running out. At least when I run out of money, I'll still know how to earn more. I gathered my purse and coat, noting how none of them moved to stop me. The people who'd spent the evening demonstrating their refined manners couldn't manage a single word of response. "Melody," I said, looking directly at my daughter, "when you're ready to have an honest conversation about family, respect, and what really matters, you know my number. Until then, you can figure out how to pay your own bills." I walked through the foyer we'd started, past the expensive paintings and marble surfaces that represented everything these people thought made them better than me. Behind me, I could hear the explosion beginning, voices raised in accusation, papers rustling, the sound of carefully constructed facades crumbling in real time. The December air felt clean and cold against my face as I walked to my car. In the rearview mirror, I could see lights blazing in every window of the Whitfield house. 12 people probably destroying friendships and social connections as they processed what they'd learned about each other. I drove home through neighborhoods where families were finishing their Thanksgiving dinners without drama, without manipulation, without the need to prove their worth to people who would never truly accept them anyway. The calls started Friday morning. First Melody, her voice raw from crying, demanding to know how I could humiliate her in front of Preston's family. Then Preston himself, alternating between threats and desperate pleas for discretion. Finally, Charles Whitfield, his tone a mixture of rage and panic, threatening legal action for invasion of privacy. I let them all go to voicemail and spent the day organizing my finances without the drain of monthly transfers. I could finally afford to fix my roof. Saturday brought a knock at my door. Melody stood on my porch, but she looked different, younger somehow, like she'd shed a costume that had never quite fit properly. "May I come in, Mom?" I stepped aside to let her enter, noting how she looked around my modest living room as if seeing it for the first time in years. "The Whitfield family isn't speaking to me," she said without preamble. "Preston's parents blame me for bringing shame to their family name. Half their social circle is avoiding them after reading those financial reports." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. I'd never intended to hurt her, only to expose the people who were using both of us. "Are you, though? Sorry, I mean?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm sorry that you got caught in the crossfire. I'm not sorry that they finally faced consequences for their behavior." She sat on my couch, her shoulders slumping with exhaustion. "I've been thinking about what you said about Preston's marriage strategy. I never realized, God, Mom, I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid. You were manipulated by someone who made it his profession to manipulate people." But I went along with it. The exclusion, the condescension, treating you like you were some kind of embarrassing relative we had to manage. Tears started falling, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in months. I became someone I don't recognize, and I let them convince me that it was personal growth. I sat beside her, noting how she instinctively leaned into my shoulder the way she had as a child. "What happens now?" "Preston wants to work things out. He says we can get past this if we just keep quiet and let things settle down." "And what do you want?" "I want to understand how I became the kind of person who was ashamed of her mother. I want to understand why I thought these people were better than us, then they're actually much worse." Over the next hour, she told me about life behind the facade, Preston's increasing demands for social performance, his criticism of anything that reminded him of her background, his systematic campaign to distance her from friends and family who might interfere with his financial plans. "He made me feel like I had to choose between him and you," she said, "and I chose wrong. You chose what you thought would make you happy. That's not wrong. It's just human. But I hurt you. I hurt you badly. And I knew I was doing it. And I did it anyway because I wanted to belong somewhere that turned out to be built on lies." We talked until evening, honest conversation, without the careful performance that had characterized our relationship for the past year. She told me about Preston's debts, his constant anxiety about money, his increasing distance from her as the financial pressure mounted. "I think he married me because he thought you'd be an easy mark," she said. "Someone who would pay anything to maintain a relationship with her daughter." "He wasn't entirely wrong," I admitted. "I might have kept paying indefinitely if you hadn't pushed me out so completely." "So what changed?" "I realized that relationships based on financial transactions aren't relationships at all. They're business arrangements, and in business arrangements, both parties should benefit." Monday morning brought the final resolution. Melody called to tell me she'd moved out of the house I'd helped them buy. The divorce papers would be filed by the end of the week. "I can't stay married to someone who views my mother as a resource to be exploited," she said. "And I can't keep living a lie about who I am or where I come from." Preston called an hour later, his voice desperate. "Eleanor, you have to talk to her. She's throwing away everything we've built together." "What you built was a fantasy funded by my money while excluding me from the benefits," I replied. "I'm not particularly invested in maintaining that arrangement." "But the house, the lifestyle, everything she's gotten used to." "She'll figure it out. People from our background are good at adapting to circumstances. We have to be." The Whitfield family made one final attempt to control the narrative. Margaret called to suggest we meet for coffee, woman to woman, to discuss how we might all move forward with dignity intact. I met her at a downtown cafe, curious to see how she'd approach damage control. She arrived 15 minutes late, a power play that might have intimidated me 3 months earlier, but now just seemed petty. "Eleanor, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot," she began. "You mean when you spent an entire evening making it clear that you considered me intellectually and socially inferior?" Her composure crept slightly. "I hope you understand that what you did at Thanksgiving was devastating to our family's reputation. Your reputation was built on lies and financial manipulation. I just provided some context. Nevertheless, we need to find a way to move forward. Perhaps we could arrange for you to meet with Preston privately, work out some kind of ongoing support arrangement that would be beneficial to everyone." I stared at her for a long moment, amazed by her audacity. Even now, after everything that had been exposed, she was still trying to figure out how to maintain access to my financial support. "Margaret, let me be very clear about something. The ATM is permanently closed. Your son will have to figure out how to support himself like everyone else who doesn't have someone else's mother to exploit. But surely you care about Melody's happiness and security." "I care about Melody's dignity and self-respect. Supporting a man who married her for money while treating her family like garbage isn't contributing to either of those things." She left without ordering coffee, her perfectly composed facade finally cracking completely. Through the cafe window, I watched her fumble with her phone, probably calling Charles to report that their last-ditch effort to maintain their financial arrangement had failed. Christmas morning arrived gray and quiet, the kind of Spokane winter day that made you grateful for worn houses and genuine company. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't calculating how much money would disappear from my account for holiday expenses that never seemed to benefit anyone but Preston's credit card companies. I was arranging flowers in my kitchen when someone knocked on my door. Melody stood on my porch, holding a covered dish and wearing jeans and a sweater I remembered from her college days. "I made green bean casserole," she said, "the way you taught me, with the fried onions on top. I thought maybe we could start a new tradition." "I thought you were spending Christmas with friends." I realized that the friends worth spending holidays with are the ones who love you for who you are, not who you're pretending to be. We spent the morning cooking together, talking about everything and nothing, the way we had before Preston, and social climbing had complicated our relationship. She told me about her plans to move back to the neighborhood where she'd grown up, to find a job that used her actual skills instead of serving as decoration for someone else's ambitions. "I keep thinking about that recording you played," she said while he worked on the turkey, "the way he talked about manipulating both of us. I can't believe I didn't see it. He was very good at what he did. That's what made him dangerous. Do you think I'll ever be able to trust my judgment again?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in months. Without the designer clothes and perfect makeup, she looked like herself again. Younger, more vulnerable, but infinitely more real. "Your judgment brought you home for Christmas," I said. "I'd say it's working just fine." Around noon, my phone rang. An unknown number, probably Preston making another attempt to negotiate some kind of financial arrangement. I've been getting calls like that for weeks, increasingly desperate attempts to restore some version of the support system he built his life around. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Melody asked. "I'm spending Christmas with my daughter. Everything else can wait." We ate dinner at my kitchen table, the same one where she'd done homework through elementary school, where we'd planned her college applications, where I'd sat alone for countless meals while my money funded her life with people who considered me unworthy of their company. "I have something for you," she said after we'd finished eating. She disappeared into the living room and returned with a small wrapped box. Inside was a photo in a simple silver frame. The two of us at her high school graduation, both grinning at the camera, my arm around her shoulders in the unself-conscious way of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "I found it in a box of things I'd put away when I redecorated the house to impress Preston's friends," she said. "I forgot how happy we used to look together." "We were happy," I said, running my finger along the edge of the frame. "We can be happy again." "I'd like that. But Mom, I need you to know that I understand what you did and why you did it. You didn't just expose Preston's lies. You showed me who I'd become, someone who was ashamed of the most important relationship in her life." The afternoon stretched comfortably between us, filled with the kind of easy conversation I'd missed more than I'd realized. We talked about her plans for the future, my own goals for retirement, the possibility of taking a trip together somewhere neither of us had ever been. Around evening, she helped me clean up the kitchen, working with the familiar efficiency of someone who'd grown up in this house, who knew where everything belonged. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you regret it, the way you handled everything at Thanksgiving?" I considered the question while I loaded the dishwasher. "I regret that it took me so long to stand up for myself. I regret that I enabled their behavior for as long as I did. But exposing the truth? No, I don't regret that. Even knowing how much it hurt? Melody, they were hurting both of us long before I did anything. They were just doing it quietly, in ways designed to make us feel grateful for the abuse." She nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about how they made me feel like I should be embarrassed by you. You, who worked 3 jobs to send me to private school, who never missed a parent conference or school play, even when you were exhausted, who sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities you never had. I didn't sacrifice anything. I invested in you because I love you. That's what mothers do. But they made me forget that. They made me think love was something you had to earn through performance and conformity. As the sun set, we settled in the living room with tea and the last of the Christmas cookies we'd made together. The tree I bought for myself glowed softly in the corner, decorated with ornaments that held memories instead of trying to impress anyone. "What do you think happened to Preston?" she asked. "James tells me he's moved back in with his parents while he looks for work. Turns out being fired for financial irregularities makes employment difficult, especially when your former mother-in-law has documented evidence of your patterns. And the Whitfields? They're having to significantly downsize their lifestyle. Apparently, several of their social circle have distanced themselves since learning about their actual financial situation. It's amazing how quickly old money friends disappear when they realize the money is neither old nor actually there." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the Christmas lights twinkle on the tree. Outside, I could hear neighbors laughing. The sounds of families enjoying their holiday without drama or manipulation. "Mom, yes, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I never gave up on you. I gave up on enabling people who were hurting you while using my money to do it." She curled up against my shoulder the way she had as a child, and for the first time in 3 years, Christmas felt like the celebration it was supposed to be. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in June, addressed in handwriting I almost recognized. Inside, 3 pages of careful script from Preston, apparently written from his parents' house where he'd been living since the divorce was finalized. "Eleanor," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you don't read this. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did to you and Melody, and I'm deeply sorry." He wrote about therapy, about facing the patterns of manipulation he learned from watching his own family's financial desperation disguised as superiority, about realizing that his marriage had been built on exploitation rather than love, and how that realization had forced him to confront who he'd become. I spent years telling myself that I was helping Melody become sophisticated, that I was elevating her social status. The truth is that I was systematically isolating her from the people who actually loved her so that I could more easily exploit both of you financially. I know this doesn't change anything, and I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing because you deserve to know that your actions that Thanksgiving changed more than just my circumstances. They probably saved both Melody and me from a life built on lies. I read the letter twice, then set it aside. Forgiveness wasn't something I could grant on demand, but understanding was possible. Preston had been raised in a family system that valued appearance over authenticity, status over integrity. That didn't excuse his behavior, but it explained it. My phone buzzed with a text from Melody, who was settling into her new job at a nonprofit organization that helped families navigate healthcare bureaucracy. "Lunch tomorrow? I want to tell you about my latest project." I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. Your treat this time. I know you can afford it." She responded with laughing emojis, and I realized that she could afford it now. Not because she was married to someone with trust fund expectations, but because she'd learned to live within her means while doing work that actually mattered to her. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The house around me felt different than it had 6 months ago, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted that I hadn't fully realized I'd been carrying. My phone rang. James Morrison, probably with an update on some case he was working. "Eleanor, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted you to know that Preston Whitfield contacted me today." "Oh?" He wanted to thank you for exposing his behavior before he did something that would have landed him in legal trouble. Apparently, he was planning some fairly serious financial fraud before your Thanksgiving intervention changed his trajectory. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. So you're saying I didn't just expose past crimes? I prevented future ones? That's exactly what I'm saying. Sometimes forcing people to face consequences actually saves them from worse consequences down the road. After we hung up, I walked inside and looked at the photo Melody had given me for Christmas, the one of us at her graduation. 2 women who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Before manipulation and social climbing had complicated everything. Tomorrow I would have lunch with my daughter, who was rebuilding her life on foundations of honesty instead of pretense. Tomorrow I would continue planning the European vacation I could finally afford now that I wasn't subsidizing someone else's lifestyle. Tomorrow I would keep living the life I'd earned through decades of hard work and sacrifice. But tonight, I raised my wine glass to the empty kitchen, to the photo on my mantle, to the woman I used to be and the woman I'd become. Here's to knowing your worth, I said to the quiet house, and to never again accepting less than you deserve. The wine tasted like freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. If you enjoyed this story of justice and family redemption, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about standing up for yourself when the people closest to you take advantage of your love. What do you think about Eleanor's methods? Was she too harsh? Or did the Whitfield family get exactly what they deserved? And how would you handle discovering that your own family was ashamed of you while living off your financial support? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives on these complex family dynamics.